I used to think the forest was alive in a poetic way, the kind of thing you say to make nature sound mysterious. Now I know better. The forest is alive, and some parts of it remember you long after you leave. My name is Ethan Cole. I've been a park ranger at Olympic National Forest for 12 years. If you've ever visited the western slopes of Washington, you know how the fog rolls in off the Pacific and hangs low between the cedar trunks like smoke that refuses to rise. It's beautiful, haunting, and on certain nights, it feels like the earth itself is holding its breath. People go missing here. That's not new, but over the last year something has changed. Hikers vanish without a trace, not lost, not eaten, not buried by slides or storms. They just stop existing. Their tents are still zipped, food untouched. Shoes lined neatly by the fire pit, as if they simply stood up and walked into the trees never to return. I used to file those reports with the same tired logic every ranger uses. Accidents happen, the forest is unforgiving, but then I found something I wasn't supposed to find, and it changed everything. But the call came in last spring. A couple from Portland had gone off-grid somewhere near the Hoh rainforest. They were both experienced hikers, backpacked every year, left with 3 days' supplies and an emergency beacon that never activated. The local sheriff's department asked us to sweep the northern ridges while volunteers handled the trailheads. I remember the morning we started the search, the smell of pine needles crushed under my boots, the low hum of insects under a cold sun. My partner, Sarah Monroe, was new to the job, 2 years in, full of energy, still believing we could save everyone. I envied her for that. She smiled as we checked our maps. "You really think they just got lost, Ethan?" "Everyone thinks that at first," I said, tightening my pack, "until they find out what this place does to your sense of direction." Olympic National Forest covers more than 600,000 acres of wilderness, a sprawling labyrinth of ridges, lakes, and valleys that can swallow a person whole. We joke about it sometimes, how the forest doesn't give you back if it doesn't want to. By midday, the clouds broke and sunlight filtered through the canopy like gold through green glass. We hiked in silence for hours, marking coordinates, calling the missing couple's names into the stillness. Nothing. No birds, no squirrels, no wind. Just silence so heavy it pressed on your chest. That's when I noticed it. A small clearing about 50 yards off trail. At first glance, it looked like any other old campsite, but something about it felt wrong. The tent was half collapsed, its poles bent like they'd been yanked from the inside. Sleeping bags lay unrolled but untouched. Food packs unopened. A small camping stove sat cold beside a log, with a pot still full of water that hadn't boiled away. They hadn't been gone long. Sarah crouched beside the tent, inspecting a torn flap. "Bear?" I shook my head. "No claw marks, no tracks. Look at the ground. The soil's undisturbed." It was true. The moss around the site looked unbroken, as if no one had walked there in days. The forest had swallowed every trace of movement. That's when I found the journal. It was wedged beneath a sleeping bag, a small black notebook sealed in a waterproof pouch. I flipped through pages of handwritten entries. Weather notes, trail coordinates, sketches of mushrooms and birds. But near the end, the handwriting changed. The words were jagged, frantic. April 19th, heard something last night. Sounded like whistling. Thought it was another camper, but it was close. Too close. April 20th, the whistling again. It said my name this time. Can't be real. Must be wind. April 21. Sarah says we should leave tomorrow. I told her I heard footsteps outside. She didn't believe me. I froze. The woman's name was also Sarah. The last entry was smudged, the ink bleeding into the paper like it had been written in rain. April 22nd. It's right outside. I can hear it breathing. That was the final line. No signature, no closure. Sarah, my Sarah, looked up from the tent, reading the worry in my face. "What is it?" she asked. I handed her the notebook without a word. She skimmed the pages, her expression changing from curiosity to unease. "Ethan," she said quietly, this is messed up." I nodded, staring into the forest beyond the clearing. For a moment I thought I saw something shift between the trees, a shadow where no shadow should be. But when I blinked, it was gone. That night, back at the outpost, the storm rolled in hard. Rain hammered the cabin roof while lightning flashed over the ridgeline. I sat at the desk, the missing couple's notebook open beside my ranger log. Sarah had gone home for the evening, but I couldn't shake the sound of that word. Whistling. I'd heard strange noises before. Elk calls. Wind through narrow canyons. Even mountain lions scream like women if you catch them at night. But this felt different. This was personal. I replayed the last page in my head. I can hear it breathing. Outside, thunder cracked. I flinched, embarrassed at how jumpy I'd become. The radio crackled to life with static. "Ethan, you still up there?" It was Jennings, my supervisor. "Yeah," I said, rubbing my temples. "Just going over the report. Don't lose sleep on this one. The couple probably fell into the gorge or hit bad weather. Happens every year." "I found their camp," I said slowly. "And a journal. Something's off about it." Jennings sighed through the line. "You always think that. You want me to file it as unexplained? Fine. But don't start telling ghost stories to the new rangers." The radio clicked off. I stared at the empty channel, feeling that old frustration settle in. Jennings was a good ranger, methodical, practical, but he'd been doing this too long. He'd stopped believing the forest could surprise him. I hadn't. And 2 days later, another hiker vanished. This time it was a solo backpacker, male, mid-30s, last seen near the same sector, Echo Ridge. When dispatch sent out the coordinates, something cold ran down my spine. That ridge wasn't even supposed to be open. It was part of an old logging road shut down in the 1980s after a landslide. No one should have been there. Sarah and I geared up and headed out at dawn. The forest was drenched from last night's rain, mist rising from the moss like smoke. We followed the GPS markers until the trail narrowed and the trees grew close enough to block the sun. That's when we heard it. A sound carried through the fog, faint, melodic, almost human. 3 long notes, low and rising, a whistle. Sarah stopped in her tracks. "Tell me you heard that." I nodded slowly, my pulse kicking up. Could be wind through a hollow tree. Then why does it sound like it's moving? She was right. The sound drifted between the trunks, echoing off unseen walls. It was impossible to tell where it came from. We followed it deeper into the woods, against my better judgment. Each time we thought we were getting closer, the sound shifted, always a few paces ahead. The trees thickened, the air damp and heavy. The ground squelched under our boots. Then, just as suddenly, the whistling stopped. Silence. I turned to Sarah, but she wasn't there. "Sarah?" My voice echoed unnaturally, like the forest was repeating it back. I spun around, flashlight slicing through fog. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw her standing between the trees, pale face, hair dripping with mist. But when I stepped forward, she was gone. My throat tightened. I called her name again, louder this time. The sound bounced off the forest walls in a dozen directions, coming back distorted. Then, faintly, I heard her voice, "Ethan," from far to my left. I ran toward it, crashing through branches, lungs burning. I burst into a small clearing and stopped dead. There was no one there. Only the smell of wet earth and something faintly metallic, blood maybe, lingering in the air. That's when I heard it again. The whistle. 3 long notes, but this time, It came from directly behind me. I spun around, shining my light. Nothing. Just fog and silence. My breathing came fast and shallow. "Sarah!" A twig snapped somewhere in the darkness. I swung the light toward the sound and caught a glimpse of something moving. Tall, lean, almost human in shape, but wrong somehow, as if its joints bent in directions they shouldn't. Then the light flickered and died. I dropped to one knee, fumbling for the spare batteries. My hands shook so badly I could barely load them. When the beam came back on, the clearing was empty. The forest seemed to exhale, a long, slow gust that whispered through the leaves. I found Sarah 15 minutes later, sitting on a fallen log by the main trail, pale and shaking. "Where did you go?" she whispered. "I was about to ask you the same thing." She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "I heard you calling me from the ridge, but when I followed it, it wasn't your voice." Neither of us spoke after that. We made it back to the Jeep in silence. On that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the whistle, 3 notes echoing endlessly through the fog. The next morning, I drove back to the ridge alone. Sarah didn't want to come, said she needed time. I didn't blame her. I told myself I was just going to check for clues, maybe finish the report. But deep down, I think I needed to prove I wasn't losing my mind. The trail looked different in daylight, harmless, almost serene. Birds chirped, sunlight glimmered on dew. For a moment, I wondered if the whole thing had been some shared hallucination. Then I saw the footprints. They weren't mine, and they weren't Sarah's. Bare, human-shaped, but huge, at least 16 inches long, pressed deep into the mud like something heavy had walked there. They led off the trail into a patch of ferns and disappeared halfway through, as if the creature had stepped into thin air. That was the moment the forest stopped feeling like home. I didn't tell Jennings about the footprints, or the whistling, or the figure I thought I'd seen. I just wrote the report, closed the file, and went home. But that night, as I sat on my porch listening to the rain, I heard something faint through the trees beyond my cabin. 3 notes, low and rising, and then a voice. My voice. It called out softly, "Ethan." I didn't sleep at all after that. God, if you've listened this far, I want to thank you. These stories, the real ones, they take something out of you to tell. If you want to hear what happened next, what I found when I followed that sound back into the woods, make sure you subscribe and stay with me. I promise, the truth about what's been taking people here is something you'll never forget. That night, after the voice outside my cabin faded, I stayed frozen in the dark for what felt like hours. The radio sat on the table beside my hand, silent. I kept waiting for Jennings to call, for anyone to remind me that the world beyond these woods still existed. The forest outside was black and wet and endless. Every so often the wind shifted, carrying the scent of cedar and damp earth through the screen door. Then came the softest scrape against the porch railing, wood against wood, deliberate, steady. I eased the rifle off the wall and crept to the window. The beam of my flashlight sliced through the rain. Nothing moved, no footprints on the steps, no shadows in the yard. But the sound hadn't come from imagination. It was too real, too rhythmic. I stepped outside, boots sinking into the mud, and listened. All I could hear was the forest breathing, slow, heavy gusts swaying the trees. The kind of silence that feels like a living thing waiting for you to speak first. I whispered into it, "Who's there?" Something answered. It wasn't a voice exactly, more like the forest exhaled through a narrow throat, shaping itself into words that almost made sense. Then 3 faint whistles drifted down from the trees. That was enough for me. I backed into the cabin and locked the door. I didn't sleep. I just watched the tree line until dawn, rifle across my knees, trying to convince myself that sound was nothing more than wind. When morning came, I did what any ranger does when fear starts to feel bigger than duty. I tried to bury it under paperwork. I logged maintenance requests, checked weather data, responded to campers about permits. Anything to make the night before feel like a bad dream. But mid-afternoon, a call came through the Ranger channel that snapped me upright. Unit 6, this is base. We've got a report of another missing hiker, solo male. Last contact yesterday near Echo Ridge Trailhead. You're closest. Copy? My stomach dropped. Copy that. I grabbed my pack before I could talk myself out of it. The drive out took 40 minutes of winding dirt roads slick with mud. The farther I went, the darker the sky grew, clouds bunching like bruises over the peaks. I parked near the barricade that marked the closed section and hiked the last mile on foot. The trail was narrower than I remembered, almost erased by moss and ferns. Every sound seemed louder here, the drip of rain off branches, the crunch of my boots, my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. Halfway up the ridge, I spotted movement ahead. My hand went to the rifle automatically, but it was only Sarah, standing on the trail with her pack slung over one shoulder. Thought you were taking a break, I said, lowering the gun. She looked exhausted, eyes shadowed. I was. Couldn't sleep. Figured if someone else went missing, you'd come here. I should have told her to go back. Instead, I felt a strange relief that I wasn't alone. We followed the GPS signal from the missing man's phone until it died somewhere near the ridge's crest. The forest opened into a high clearing that looked out over the valley, a view so vast it made you forget how easily it could swallow you. Near the center of the clearing sat a small pile of stones arranged in a perfect spiral. On top rested a single item, a camera. Sarah picked it up carefully. The lens was cracked, but the power light still glowed faintly. She scrolled through the photos, selfies, trail shots, then something else. She froze. Ethan, look at this. The next picture showed the same clearing, taken from about 20 yards back. But in the background, behind the stones, a tall shape stood half hidden among the trees, blurred, almost translucent, but undeniably there. Before I could process it, the screen flickered and died. I looked around the clearing. No tracks, no signs of struggle. The spiral of stones looked fresh, like someone had placed them within the last day. Then Sarah crouched and touched the dirt between the stones. It's warm, she whispered. I didn't understand. What do you mean? Feel it. I knelt and pressed my palm to the soil. She was right. Beneath the surface, a faint heat pulsed like a slow heartbeat. I opened my mouth to say something, but the forest cut me off. A single whistle drifted through the trees, low, drawn out, rising at the end, then another, then a third. Sarah's eyes widened. It's the same pattern. We backed toward the trail, rifles up. The whistling circled us now, coming from everywhere at once, echoing so perfectly it was impossible to tell direction. Ethan, Sarah said, voice trembling, we have to move. We turned and ran. Branches slapped our faces, roots snagged our boots. The sound chased us, 3 notes, over and over, closer every time. At the base of the ridge, the forest opened into a stream crossing. We splashed through knee-deep water and scrambled up the far bank. When we finally stopped to catch our breath, the whistling was gone, but something else remained. The smell. Metallic, sweet, wrong, like blood and rot carried on damp air. Sarah wiped rain from her face. Tell me that was the wind. I didn't answer. I just looked back toward the ridge. For a moment I saw a flicker of movement, something stepping between 2 trees, tall and thin, watching us. Then it melted into the fog. We made it back to the outpost by sunset. Jennings was waiting, arms crossed. "Where the hell have you two been?" "Echo Ridge," I said. "Another disappearance. We found his camera. You should see what's on it." He scowled. "You were ordered to stay clear of that sector. There's unstable ground and unmarked shafts up there." "There's something else up there," Sarah cut in. "We heard—" Jennings held up a hand. "I don't want to hear about ghosts or forest spirits. You two are exhausted. Get cleaned up, write your reports, and take tomorrow off. That's an order." Sarah stormed out. I stayed, staring at the floor. Jennings sighed, his voice softening. "Look, Ethan, you've been out here too long. Every ranger gets spooked once in a while. These woods mess with your head. Don't let them." I nodded, pretending to agree, and left. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest wasn't done with us. And the next morning, I found Sarah sitting outside her cabin, clutching a mug of coffee like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She looked up at me with haunted eyes. "It followed me home," she said. I sat beside her. "What do you mean?" I heard it again, the whistling. Around 3 a.m. I went outside and... She stopped, shivering. There were footprints in the mud, big ones. They circled the cabin. I felt that same cold dread crawl through me. "Did you take pictures?" She shook her head. I couldn't move. It was like it wanted me to come closer. We sat in silence, listening to the morning rain. Finally, she whispered, "Ethan, what if it's not just one thing? What if it's the forest itself?" I wanted to tell her she was imagining it, that we'd find logical answers. But deep down, I wasn't sure anymore. That day, we both filed leave requests. Jennings approved them without argument. Maybe he thought a few days away would clear our heads. But I couldn't rest. The forest had become an itch under my skin, a riddle I couldn't ignore. That evening, I drove out again, alone. And the ridge was wrapped in fog, thicker than before. I moved quietly, every step measured. The spiral of stones was gone. In its place, the ground had sunk into a shallow depression, as if the earth itself had inhaled. I crouched and brushed aside the wet leaves. Beneath them lay a torn piece of red fabric, part of a backpack strap. I recognized the model. It matched the missing hiker's gear list. I lifted it, and beneath it, half buried in the mud, was something else. A whistle. Small, metal, government-issued. Ranger standard. My pulse kicked. Only park rangers carried these. I turned it over and saw 3 scratched initials along the side. JMH Jennings. A sudden gust of wind tore through the trees, cold enough to sting my eyes. The forest moaned with it, deep and resonant, almost human. I pocketed the whistle and started back toward the trail. That's when I heard my own voice whisper behind me. "Ethan." I spun around. No one there. Then again, closer. "Ethan." I ran. Branches whipped at my face. Roots clawed at my boots. The voice followed, always behind me, always just out of sight. By the time I reached my truck, my lungs were on fire. I slammed the door, started the engine, and tore down the dirt road without looking back. When I finally stopped at the main highway, I pulled the whistle from my pocket. It felt heavier than before, almost warm. I raised it to my lips, hesitated, then blew. 3 notes echoed into the night. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then faintly, from somewhere far up the ridge, the forest answered with the same 3 notes. That's when I knew the truth. The missing people hadn't just vanished. They'd been taken, and whatever had taken them was still calling out, looking for someone new to answer. I drove home under a sky the color of ash, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The whistle sat on the seat beside me, humming softly like it was alive. I didn't sleep that night either. I don't think I ever will again. If you've stayed with me through this part of the story, thank you. The forest still has more to tell, and I'm not done listening. Make sure you subscribe and stay with the channel, because the next part, when I finally follow that sound back into the mountains, is where the truth really begins. I didn't go back to the station for 2 days after finding Jennings's whistle. I told myself I needed time to clear my head, but the truth was simpler. I was scared. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those huge footprints in the mud and heard the echo of my own voice whispering back at me through the trees. When I finally walked into the ranger office, Jennings was already there, hunched over a stack of reports. The morning light filtered through the window blinds, striping his face with pale lines. He looked up, expression unreadable. "You look like hell, Cole." "Thanks," I said, dropping my pack by the door. He gestured at the chair. "Sit. We need to talk about your report on the ridge." I sat, trying to read his tone. "I went up there after you," he said. "Didn't find a damn thing. No footprints, no gear, no camera." "You sure you weren't seeing shadows?" I stared at him, heart hammering. "You found nothing? Not even the spiral of stones?" He shook his head. "Nothing but old logging debris. You're chasing ghosts." I wanted to tell him about the whistle, his whistle, but the way he looked at me made my mouth go dry. Either he was hiding something, or he truly didn't remember. "You ever patrol that area before it was closed?" I asked carefully. He gave me a strange look. "That section's been off limits since '83. Why?" I hesitated. "Because your initials were on a whistle I found there." Jennings went still. His eyes narrowed, just a flicker of confusion or guilt before his voice hardened. "You must be mistaken. Now drop it, Cole. That's an order." He walked out before I could say another word. Sarah showed up later that afternoon. She'd taken a couple of days off too, but she looked worse than I felt. Dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept since the night on the ridge. "You still hearing it?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. "Sometimes, not always outside. Sometimes, in my head." She laughed nervously. "I sound crazy, don't I?" "No," I said. "You sound like someone who's seen what I've seen." We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, the rain returned, a constant drumming on the tin roof. Finally, she said, "I think we need to go back up there, but not to prove anything to Jennings. For us." My stomach clenched. "Sarah, last time we nearly didn't make it back." "I know," she said. "But something's happening up there, Ethan. And if we don't figure it out, more people are going to die." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that the best thing we could do was forget. But the truth was, she'd already said the words that had been circling in my own mind. By the time the rain stopped, I had made up my mind. We were going back. And the next morning, the fog was so thick it turned the world to glass. Every surface glistened. The forest looked washed clean and yet somehow ancient, like it had just been born again from the mist. We packed heavy. Satellite phone, cameras, motion sensors, 2 rifles, and enough food for 3 days. Jennings had no idea we were heading out again. I left a short note in my logbook. Patrolling North Sector. Possible follow-up on missing person case. We reached the ridge by late afternoon. The air felt heavier there, almost electrical. The closer we got, the more the forest changed. The birds quieted, the trees grew denser, and the smell of moss grew sharp and metallic. "Same clearing?" Sarah asked. "Same one." When we broke through the tree line, I stopped short. The clearing looked exactly as before, except the spiral of stones was back, perfectly arranged, gleaming wet under the fog. "I thought Jennings said he didn't find this," she whispered. "Maybe he didn't want to." We unpacked the motion cameras and set them on a perimeter, angling lenses toward the clearing. Sarah tested the batteries and infrared. I focused on the spiral. The ground inside it was warm again, not heat from the sun. This was deeper, pulsing like something alive beneath the soil. I pulled my glove off and pressed my palm flat. A faint vibration hummed against my skin, steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat under earth. I felt my stomach twist. Sarah called from behind me. "Ethan, I'm picking up movement 40 yards northeast." I spun, nothing but fog. "Could be a deer," I said, but I didn't believe it. We stood still, listening. Then the forest exhaled that sound again. 3 notes, low and rising. The whistler. Sarah tightened her grip on her rifle. "How can it be this close?" "Back away," I said. "Stay in the open." We moved slowly, step by step. The sound circled us, weaving between trees. It wasn't wind, it wasn't animal, it was deliberate, intelligent. Then a branch snapped behind us, loud, heavy, close. Sarah spun and fired. The gunshot ripped through the fog, echoing into the valley. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. "Anything?" I asked. She shook her head, chest heaving. "Nothing." But I saw it then. Just beyond her shoulder, a figure, tall and still, half shrouded in mist. Its outline rippled as if it were made of smoke. "Sarah," I whispered. She turned, and it was gone. We spent the night in the clearing, cameras rolling, flares within reach. The temperature dropped fast. By midnight, the fog had thickened to the point where our lantern light could barely reach 10 feet. Sarah was reviewing footage on her tablet. Most of it static. One motion trigger around 11, but nothing on screen. I rubbed my eyes. "It's like it knows how to avoid the cameras." She frowned. "You think it's alive?" "I think whatever it is understands us." The air grew colder. My breath came out white. Then, faintly, the whistle began again. This time it was closer, almost beside my ear. Sarah froze. "It's right here." The sound came again, overlapping itself, echoing from every direction, and beneath it, words. Not human words, but something trying to be human. It was whispering our names. Sarah. Ethan. We stood back to back, rifles raised, hearts pounding. The forest seemed to pulse around us, fog swirling like breath. Then something flashed in front of me, 2 pale eyes hovering in the dark. I fired. The blast lit the clearing in a burst of red light. When the smoke cleared, the eyes were gone, but the whistle came again, louder this time, angry. Sarah shouted over the noise, "We need to move!" We ran. Branches clawed our arms, roots snagged our boots. The sound followed, twisting through the trees like it was inside our heads. When we finally reached the old logging road, I turned back one last time. The clearing glowed faintly behind us, the spiral burning orange like molten stone. And we didn't speak for the entire hike back. By the time we reached the Jeep, dawn had turned the fog gold. Sarah sat behind the wheel, gripping it tight enough to turn her knuckles white. "What the hell was that, Ethan?" I had no answer. I stared out the window, the ridge shrinking behind us. When we reached the ranger station, Jennings was waiting again. "You two were out there all night?" His voice was sharp. "Do you have any idea what kind of trouble?" "Save it," I said. "We got evidence." I set the camera on his desk. "Check the timestamps. You'll see it for yourself." He didn't touch it. "You disobeyed orders. People are dying out there." "Jennings, and you think chasing ghost stories will fix it?" His tone snapped something in me. "Then explain this." I pulled the whistle from my pocket and dropped it onto the desk. He stared at it for a long moment. Then, without a word, he picked it up. "Where did you find this?" "Echo Ridge, near the last missing person's site." His jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have gone there." "Why not?" I demanded. He didn't answer. He just looked at the whistle like it might burn through his hand. Then he set it down slowly and said, "Because that place doesn't forget what it's given." Before I could ask what that meant, he walked out. That night, Sarah came over with the footage. She'd cleaned it up on her laptop, filtering the static. "You need to see this," she said. The first clip was from the motion sensor near the north tree line, time stamped at 11:04 p.m. The screen was dark for several seconds, then something flickered across the frame. A shape, tall and skeletal, moving unnaturally fast. I leaned closer. "Pause it." She froze the frame. The figure stood halfway between the trees, turned toward the camera. Its outline shimmered, blending into the fog. But the eyes were unmistakable, pale, round, glowing faintly. Then the audio kicked in. 3 long whistles, clear as day. Sarah's hands shook as she closed the laptop. "That's proof, Ethan. Whatever this thing is, it's real." I nodded slowly. "And it knows we're watching." The next morning I woke to the sound of knocking on my door. When I opened it, there was no one there, just a single item hanging from the doorknob, Jennings's whistle. But this time there were 2 sets of initials carved into the side, mine and his. I didn't pick it up. I just stood there in the doorway, staring at it, feeling the forest watching from the tree line beyond my yard. The whistle swayed in the wind, catching the morning light, and from far off in the valley, I heard it answer. 3 notes. The whistle still hung there when I left for the station. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. The metal glinted like an open eye watching me go. By the time I reached the station, Sarah was already there, a thermos of coffee in her hand and the look of someone who had been awake all night. She said quietly, "You saw it too, didn't you?" I nodded. It was waiting on my porch. We both sat down in the briefing room. For a long minute, we didn't speak. Then I said, "Jennings knows more than he's telling. He froze when he saw that whistle." Sarah took a slow sip of coffee. I looked through the station archives. There's barely anything from before the mid-'80s, like someone erased half the reports. But I did find one reference. Echo Ridge Sector. Closure due to Ranger fatalities, 1983. No details. I felt a chill climb my spine. He was stationed here then. She nodded. If there were deaths, he would have been part of the investigation. I stood. Then we're finding those records, whatever it takes. The Olympic station kept its old logs in a storage shed behind the main office. Most of the boxes hadn't been opened in decades. Dust coated everything like a second skin. We spent the afternoon sorting through file after file, old maps, weather charts, wildlife tallies. Nothing on Echo Ridge. Then Sarah found it. A thin folder stamped Confidential Incident Report, 1983. She handed it to me carefully, as if it might fall apart. Inside were only 3 sheets. The first page was a summary. Subject: Missing Personnel, Echo Ridge Sector. Date: May 11th, 1983. Personnel lost: Rangers, Thompson, Harrow, and J.M. Jennings. Status: Presumed deceased. Cause undetermined. I blinked. Presumed deceased? Sarah leaned over my shoulder. But Jennings is alive. The second page was a witness statement, half faded. We heard the whistling again around 0200 hours. Thompson went out to check the perimeter. He didn't come back. When Harrow followed, the radio cut to static. I went after them and found only a spiral of stones still warm. The ground moved under it like it was breathing. I don't know how I got out alive. JMJ. My throat went dry. He reported his own death. The final page was a typewritten memo from headquarters. Echo Ridge Sector permanently closed. All materials classified. Remaining personnel reassigned. Do not engage local press or civilians. The forest will reclaim what it is owed. Sarah whispered, "What the hell does that mean?" Before I could answer, the shed door creaked open behind us. Jennings stood there in the light, a silhouette filling the doorway. He said quietly, "You shouldn't be reading that." I closed the folder. "You were there." He nodded once. "Yes, and you don't want to know what I saw." "Try me." Jennings stepped inside, his boots crunching on gravel. The air seemed to tighten. "Back in '83, he said, "we were ordered to investigate strange noises, screams, missing campers, same as now. There were 5 of us. The first night we found a pit filled with bones and one of those spirals you keep talking about. The second night I woke to whistling outside the tent. By dawn, 2 men were gone. I ran. I don't remember how far. When I came to, I was lying in the hospital with half my memory burned away. They told me I'd imagined it." He looked at me, eyes wet and hard. "Whatever that thing is, it remembers faces. I changed districts 3 times to get away, but I guess it found me again." I stared at him. "Why didn't you warn us?" "Because no one believes a man who talks about ghosts." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "If you're smart, you'll burn that file and never go back to that ridge." When he was gone, Sarah exhaled shakily. "He's scared. That means it's real." That evening we drove into the nearest town, Forks, 15 miles east, to dig through public records. The library was nearly empty. We sat under flickering lights, scrolling through microfilm until our eyes ached. At first, there was nothing. Then, buried in an old Peninsula Daily News from June 1983, we found it. 3 park rangers presumed dead after disappearance in Olympic National Forest. Search discontinued after 2 weeks due to hazardous conditions. Official cause of death undetermined. Beneath the article was a blurry photograph of the search party. I recognized a younger Jennings standing at the edge of the group, face pale and hollow. Sarah pointed at the photo. "He looks like he's already seen it." We left the library after dark. Rain fell in slow, heavy drops that turned the streets into mirrors. My head buzzed with questions. If Jennings had survived the Whistler once, what had it done to let him go? And why was it calling again? We reached the station close to midnight. The main building was dark except for Jennings's office light. I thought about going in, but something in my gut told me to wait until morning. Instead, I drove Sarah home. Her cabin sat on the edge of the forest, porch light glowing faintly through the mist. "Lock your doors," I said. She gave a tired smile. "Always do." I waited until she was inside before heading back down the dirt road toward my own place. Halfway there, the radio crackled to life on the passenger seat. A whisper. My name. Then the sound of 3 notes whistled through the static. I slammed on the brakes. The engine idled, headlights cutting into rain. "Who is this?" I barked into the radio. No answer. Just breathing, slow and deep. Then faintly, "Come back." The line went dead. I reached home shaking. My porch light was out again. The whistle still hung from the doorknob, but now it was wet with something dark that glistened in the beam of my flashlight. I touched it, then recoiled. Blood. Before I could move, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Sarah. "Ethan, come quick." The message ended mid-sentence, followed by an attached photo. Blurry, dark, but unmistakable. A handprint smeared in blood across her cabin window. I didn't think. I just drove. The forest swallowed my headlights as I sped down the winding road. Rain hammered the windshield. Every shadow between the trees looked alive. When I reached her cabin, the door was open, swinging in the wind. "Sarah!" Silence. Inside, the air was freezing. Her coffee mug lay shattered on the floor, contents dried into a dark ring. The radio crackled on the counter, spitting static. Then I saw them, footprints leading from the doorway out into the woods. Bare, enormous, pressed deep into the wet soil. I grabbed my rifle and flashlight and followed. The trail wound uphill through thick timber, past moss-covered boulders and fallen logs. The footprints never wavered, always spaced evenly, too long for a human stride. After 10 minutes, I began to hear it, That same soft whistling, low and coaxing, drifting between the trees. "Sarah!" I shouted. "Answer me!" The forest gave nothing back except the whistle and the echo of my own voice. Then, faintly, I heard her, somewhere ahead, calling my name. I ran. Branches tore at my face, mud sucked at my boots. I broke into a clearing and froze. Sarah stood in the center, her back to me. The moonlight caught her hair, glinting silver. She was completely still. "Sarah!" I breathed. She turned. Her face was pale, eyes wide, mouth open like she wanted to speak but couldn't. Then I saw the thing behind her. It rose from the ground itself, tall and gaunt, its limbs stretching wrong, too long. Its skin looked like bark fused with flesh. And where its mouth should have been was nothing but a hollow slit from which the whistle poured, soft and endless. I raised my rifle and fired. The shot cracked through the clearing. But the creature didn't fall. It staggered, the hole in its chest knitting itself back together like sap closing over a wound. Sarah screamed. The sound broke whatever trance held me. I fired again, aiming for the head this time. The bullet tore through fog, and the thing vanished. Sarah collapsed. I ran to her, dropped to my knees. She was shaking violently, eyes unfocused. It touched me," she whispered. "It knows my name." I lifted her to her feet. "We're getting out of here." We didn't stop running until the cabin lights came into view. I locked the doors and helped her sit on the couch. She looked ghostly pale, sweat slicking her forehead. "Sarah," I said softly, "what happened before I got there?" She swallowed hard. "It came through the trees. It looked like you. It even spoke like you. I thought you were outside, calling me to open the door. When I realized it wasn't you, I sent the text." She started to cry. "Ethan, it can copy us." I didn't know what to say. I just held her until her shaking eased. Then she whispered, "It left something behind." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. My whistle. Except this one was carved with her initials too. At dawn, I found Jennings waiting outside again, leaning against his truck. He looked like he hadn't slept in years. "You found it, didn't you?" he said quietly. I nodded. "It's hunting her. It's hunting both of you. Once it learns your names, it can use them. It draws strength from recognition. Then how do we stop it?" Jennings stared toward the mountains. "You don't stop the forest. You bargain with it." He opened his truck door and pulled out a small metal box, dented and rusted. "This was Thompson's," he said. "He thought sound could trap it, the same way sound calls it. There's an old cave under Echo Ridge. That's where it comes from. If you go there, you might end it, or you might feed it. I won't lie to you." He pressed the box into my hands. Inside were half a dozen flashbang grenades and a single silver whistle etched with unfamiliar runes. "What's this?" I asked. "Something the local tribes used long before we showed up. They said it silences the hungry spirits. I never had the courage to use it." He turned away. "If you go, don't go at night, and don't answer when it calls." Sarah wanted to come with me, but I couldn't risk her. I promised I'd end it and return by dawn. She didn't believe me but didn't argue. By the time I reached the base of Echo Ridge, twilight had drained from the sky, leaving only a pale, colorless dusk. I followed the old road until it ended in a wall of fallen trees. Beyond that, the ground sloped down into darkness. The cave mouth was exactly where Jennings's map said it would be, a gash in the earth half hidden by ferns. Cold air poured from it, carrying the faint sound of water and something else, the slow, hollow rhythm of whistling far below. I clipped the flashbangs to my belt, drew my rifle and stepped inside. The tunnel wound downward, walls slick with condensation. My flashlight beam trembled over bones scattered along the path, deer, bear, and something disturbingly human-shaped. The deeper I went, the louder the whistling became. It wasn't one voice anymore, it was many, weaving together into a haunting chorus. At the chamber's end, the tunnel opened into a vast hollow lit by the faint glow of phosphorescent moss. In the center stood the creature, taller than before, its body flickering like smoke. The air around it shimmered. I raised the silver whistle Jennings had given me and blew. The note that came out wasn't sound so much as vibration, a pulse that shook the walls. The creature shrieked, the chorus collapsing into chaos. I threw the flashbangs one after another. The blasts filled the cavern with blinding white light. When the dust cleared, the thing was gone. Only the spiral of stones remained, glowing faintly. I turned to leave, but from behind me came a whisper. "Ethan." I froze. It was Sarah's voice. Then another, Jennings, then my father's. All of them calling my name in perfect unison. I ran. The tunnel shook, stones raining down. I burst into the open just as the cave collapsed behind me. The forest went silent. When I reached the ranger station, the first light of morning touched the peaks. Jennings's truck was gone. Sarah's cabin door was wide open. On her porch lay 2 whistles, one with my initials, one with hers. And from somewhere deep in the trees, soft as breath, came 3 notes. The forest was silent when I returned that morning, but silence in these woods never meant peace. It meant the forest was listening. Sarah's cabin stood still under a veil of fog. The porch looked just as I'd left it, except for the 2 whistles glinting on the steps. One bore my initials, the other hers. I crouched and touched neither. Each whistle hummed faintly as if vibrating with its own heartbeat. The air smelled like rain, earth, and something faintly electric, like the world waiting to exhale. "Sarah?" I called softly. No answer. Inside, the cabin was undisturbed. No signs of struggle, no blood. A half-finished cup of coffee sat on the counter. The pages of her notebook fluttered in the breeze coming from the open window. My eyes caught on a single sheet pinned under her flashlight. It was a map of the park, red circles marking each of the disappearances, all clustered around one place, Echo Ridge. In the margin, Sarah had written 3 words, "It's not over." I drove back to the station, the forest flashing by like a living shadow. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. The radio hissed faint static, but I didn't dare touch it. Every time I heard a whisper now, I wondered if it was the forest or the thing that lived inside it. Jennings's truck was parked outside when I arrived. The door to his office stood ajar. Inside, the blinds were drawn, and the air reeked of whiskey and cigarette smoke. Jennings sat at his desk, head in his hands. He looked up when I entered. His eyes were red, haunted. "She's gone, isn't she?" I nodded once, just like the others. He rubbed his face, groaning softly. "You shouldn't have gone into that cave, Cole. You stirred it up." "I thought I killed it." Jennings gave a bitter laugh. "You can't kill the forest. You only make it remember you." I dropped into the chair across from him, exhausted. "Then what do we do?" He leaned back, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "You find where it began. That's the only way to end it." That night, I couldn't sit still. I dug through Sarah's notes until my eyes burned. Her research was meticulous. Old ranger records, local legends, even hand-drawn sketches of the spiral formations. One page stood out. It was a photocopy of a letter dated 1891, written by a lumber foreman named Hiram McCleary. "We struck something under the ridge today. Bones. Hundreds of them, arranged in circles. The men say they hear voices when the wind blows through the trees. I told them it's nonsense, but the longer we stay, the more it feels like the woods are watching us. 3 men vanished last night, found their tools laid neatly on the stump. No blood, no tracks, just a low whistling that hasn't stopped since dawn. I'm closing the camp. This forest remembers everything we take from it. The next line was smudged beyond reading. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The pattern hadn't started in the 1980s. It had been repeating for over a century. The next morning, I found Jennings standing by the trucks, staring at the fog rolling over the valley. "We need to talk," I said. He didn't look at me. "You're not the first ranger to think you can fix what's wrong here. Thompson, Harrow, me, we all tried. The forest took something from each of us. What did it take from you?" He looked down at his hands, the cigarette trembling between his fingers. "My wife. She went missing 30 years ago. Right before they closed the sector. I told everyone she left me, but I know better now. I heard her voice in those woods, calling my name. For the first time, I saw the man behind the uniform, broken, desperate, clinging to duty as his only salvation. I'm going back out there," I said. "I have to find Sarah. Maybe the others too." He exhaled smoke slowly. "If you do, take this." He handed me a battered field radio, old model. Doesn't use the same frequencies as our current ones. That thing, whatever it is, seems to mimic our voices through standard comms. Maybe this will keep it out. He hesitated, then added, "And if you hear me calling your name out there, don't answer." And by noon, I was back on the trail. The ridge loomed ahead, half shrouded in fog. Every sound, the creak of the trees, the drip of condensation from the canopy, felt amplified, like the forest was leaning closer to listen. I found the cave collapse easily. It was still smoking from the flashbangs. The spiral stones were buried beneath rubble, but the ground around it felt restless, as though breathing from beneath. I set up camp a few hundred yards away and radioed Jennings. His voice crackled faintly through the static. "Copy that, Cole. Keep this channel open. If you find her, don't chase the voice. Let her come to you." "I will," I lied. When night fell, the fog rolled in thick as milk. I sat by the fire, rifle across my lap, waiting. Hours passed. The forest stayed silent. Then, somewhere beyond the firelight, a whistle rose. 3 long notes. I gripped the rifle tighter. "Sarah?" No reply. The whistle came again, softer this time, almost coaxing. I turned on the old field radio. "Jennings, do you read?" Static. Then a voice, faint but clear. "Ethan, it's me." It was Sarah. "Where are you?" I whispered. "You need to see this," she said. "Follow the sound." I should have turned off the radio right then, but hearing her voice shattered all reason. I grabbed the flashlight and followed the sound into the mist. The forest closed around me like a living cage. My beam caught glimpses of movement, branches bending where no wind blew, shapes shifting in the fog. The whistling grew louder, overlapping, harmonizing with itself. Then I saw her. Sarah stood at the edge of a clearing, lit by pale moonlight filtering through the canopy. She looked different, too still, too calm. Her skin seemed to catch the light wrong, almost translucent. "Sarah," I breathed, stepping closer. She smiled faintly. "You came back. I thought you were dead." "Not dead," she said softly, "just changed." Something about her voice was wrong, layered like multiple tones speaking at once. "Sarah, we need to go," I said, raising my hand. "It's still here. We can still get out." She tilted her head. "Out? There's nowhere out, Ethan. The forest remembers everything, even us." Her eyes flickered, reflecting the firelight from my camp behind me, but I hadn't built the fire that close. I turned slowly. The spiral was back, burning orange, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The ground around it quivered. When I looked back at Sarah, her smile was gone. In its place, a long, gaping slit stretched across her face. No blood, no flesh, just shadow. The sound of whistling poured from it. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. The figure took one step forward, and the forest exhaled with it. Then the ground gave way beneath me. I woke in darkness. My flashlight was gone, but the air glowed faintly green from the moss covering the walls. I was underground again, back in the tunnels beneath Echo Ridge. My legs throbbed, but nothing felt broken. I climbed to my feet and listened. The whistling was distant now, somewhere ahead. I followed the sound through winding passages, each step echoing louder than the last. The deeper I went, the stronger the smell became. Earth, decay, and something metallic, like rusted iron. Finally, I reached a wide chamber. It was filled with bones, not scattered, arranged. Spirals, circles, patterns too deliberate to be random. In the center lay something human, or almost human, its body half fused with the stone floor. A ranger badge gleamed faintly on its chest. I stepped closer, brushing away dirt. The nameplate read, J.M. Jennings. My blood turned to ice. Before I could move, the body's head turned. Eyes opened, white, empty. A voice rasped from the dry lips. I told you the forest doesn't forget. I stumbled backward, slamming into the wall. The thing that had been Jennings sat up, its bones creaking like wood under strain. It keeps us, it whispered. All of us. The spiral around the body began to glow. The bones shifted, forming new shapes, faces, hands reaching upward. The sound of whistling swelled until it filled every inch of the cavern. I fired blindly, bullets sparking off stone. The chamber screamed. The light flared blinding white. Then everything went silent. When I opened my eyes, dawn light streamed through the trees above. I was lying at the base of the ridge, my rifle beside me, covered in dirt and blood that wasn't mine. The cave entrance was gone, sealed shut by fallen rock. The forest was quiet again. I stumbled back toward the station, mind numb. Jennings' truck was still parked outside. The door to his office was open. Inside, his chair sat empty, the walls bare. Only one thing remained on the desk, his ranger badge. I picked it up. The nameplate was blank. That night, I recorded everything I'd seen. I needed a record, something tangible to prove I hadn't lost my mind. I still don't know what happened to Sarah. Sometimes I think she's still out there, part of the forest now, calling to me in the wind. The forest hasn't whistled again since that night. But when I walk the trails, I sometimes catch glimpses between the trees, shadows shaped like people I used to know. And sometimes, late at night, I wake to find a spiral drawn in dust on my cabin floor. I never hear it being made. I just know it's there. You'd think after everything, the cave, the spirals, Jennings' body, I would have left, transferred, quit, anything but stay. But I didn't. I stayed because I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest hadn't finished with me. The silence after the storm wasn't peace. It was patience. Awaiting. Jennings was gone. Sarah was gone. And I was the last one who remembered. Maybe that was why I hadn't vanished too. Maybe the forest wanted me to tell the story before it decided what to do with me. The higher-ups sent an investigation team a few weeks later. Men from the National Park Service, federal agents, people in clean uniforms and cleaner boots. They asked all the right questions. Dates, coordinates, weather conditions. But none of them listened to the answers. When I mentioned the spirals, the whistling, and the missing rangers, they nodded politely and made notes they'd never read again. Before leaving, one of them, a young guy with perfect hair, clapped me on the shoulder. "You did what you could, Ranger Cole. Some people just get lost." I wanted to tell him that no one gets that lost, that the woods didn't just swallow them, they were called. But his eyes told me he'd already stopped listening. When they left, I walked down to Echo Ridge alone. The barricades were up again, danger, closed area signs nailed to every tree, as if that could stop anything. I stood there until the fog rolled in and swallowed the signs whole, and then, faintly, from somewhere beyond the ridge, I heard it. 3 notes, low, rising, patient. The forest hadn't forgotten me. I told myself I'd only go back once more, to end it, to face whatever still lived under those trees. But that was a lie, and I knew it. Every night, I dreamed of Sarah standing in the fog, her face half-shadowed, her voice calling from the dark. Sometimes I saw Jennings too, his mouth open but no sound coming out, only wind. One morning I woke with a spiral drawn in dirt across my floorboards. I knew then that there was no leaving, so I packed my gear again. Rations, batteries, rifle, flares, and something new. Jennings' old silver whistle, the one etched with runes. I didn't know if it could stop the forest, but I needed to believe it might. It was still early when I reached the ridge. The fog was thinner this time, drifting low like breath on glass. The ground where the cave had collapsed was cracked and dry, as if the earth had healed wrong. I waited there for hours, listening. Nothing. Then, near dusk, I heard it again, the faint, drawn-out whistle echoing between the trees. It didn't come from one direction. It came from everywhere. And beneath it, another sound. Soft footfalls moving in circles just beyond sight. I raised the silver whistle to my lips and blew. The note that came out wasn't like before. It didn't cut through the air. It unraveled it. The trees shuddered. The fog recoiled like a living thing. Then the forest fell silent. For a few heartbeats, there was nothing. No sound, no motion, just the weight of 1,000 years pressing down. Then, from the tree line ahead, Sarah stepped out. She looked whole, alive even. Dirt on her clothes, scratches on her face, but real. "Sarah," I breathed, lowering my rifle. "You're alive." She smiled faintly. "I told you it wasn't over." I ran to her but stopped short. Something was wrong. Her eyes. They weren't the same pale blue I remembered. They shimmered like the surface of a lake, reflecting everything but showing nothing. "Ethan," she said softly, "you shouldn't have come back." Her voice carried 2 tones again, hers and something beneath it. "What happened to you?" I whispered. She tilted her head like she was listening to something distant. "It remembers you. It called me to find you." Then the forest exhaled again. The ground trembled under our feet, a deep rumble that made the trees sway. Between the trunks, shapes began to move, tall, thin, too fluid to be human. The Whistler's chorus had returned. "Sarah, we need to leave," I said. She smiled sadly. "You can't leave what you belong to." And then she was gone, vanished between blinks, replaced by shadow and fog. The first one came at me fast, crawling low through the mist. Its limbs bent backward, its mouth split open into that same hollow slit. I fired twice. The bullets ripped through its chest, but it didn't stop. I dropped the rifle and pulled the whistle again, blew with everything in me. The air split open. The creature screamed, its body twisting like smoke in a storm. It burst apart, dissolving into a cloud of black dust that vanished into the trees. The others shrieked in unison. I ran. Branches clawed at me, roots rose like traps beneath my boots. The forest howled, the whistling overlapping into a deafening chorus. Then I saw light, dim, flickering through the fog. I stumbled toward it and found an old ranger cabin, one of the abandoned outposts from decades ago. I slammed the door shut behind me and bolted it. The air inside was stale, thick with rot. Maps still hung on the walls, yellowed and torn. I collapsed against the door, breathing hard. My flashlight flickered. The walls creaked, expanding and contracting with each exhale of the wind outside. Then, faintly, I heard Sarah's voice through the static of my radio. "Ethan, it's waiting." I grabbed the receiver. "Where are you?" No reply. Just a long, slow whistle that filled the room, vibrating through the floorboards. I turned toward the sound and froze. The spiral was carved into the cabin floor, glowing faintly through the dust. I backed away, but the light grew brighter, bleeding through the cracks in the wood. The walls groaned louder. Then the floor split open beneath me. I fell into darkness. When I hit ground, my flashlight burst, plunging me into blackness. The air was cold and wet, smelling of soil and decay. I crawled forward on hands and knees, feeling rough stone and tangled roots. Somewhere ahead, water dripped steadily, echoing in an impossible rhythm. 3 drops, a pause, 3 more, whistling in water. The sound guided me deeper until the tunnel widened again. This chamber was smaller than the one before, but cleaner, almost deliberate. The walls were smooth, polished by hands that hadn't been human in centuries. In the center stood a single figure, tall, cloaked in shadow. "You came," it said. The voice was layered, hundreds speaking as one. I raised the whistle but didn't blow. "What are you?" It tilted its head. "You call me what you can understand, the whistler, the forest's memory, the sound between breaths." "Where are they? The others?" It stepped closer. "With me, part of me. The forest remembers them because I remember them." Its face shifted. Jennings's eyes, Sarah's smile, my own reflection flickering beneath. It wasn't a creature. It was a collection. Every soul the forest had ever kept, merged into one endless echo. I said, "You took them." I answered when they called. "They didn't call you." The whistler leaned close enough for me to see its surface rippling like smoke. "Everyone who enters these woods calls something, Ethan. Loneliness, regret, fear. The forest only gives them what they asked for." It reached out a hand made of shadow and light. "You came back because you wanted to understand. Let me show you." I stepped back, shaking. "No." But it was too late. The spiral beneath us flared, and the world dissolved into memory. I saw everything. Sarah in the clearing, the spiral glowing under her feet as she reached toward something unseen. Jennings kneeling by his wife's grave, hearing her voice whisper through the trees. The lost hikers, one by one, walking willingly into the fog, each believing they heard someone they loved calling their name. The forest hadn't hunted them. It had mirrored them, reflected their longing back until they walked straight into its arms. Then I saw myself, alone in the cabin, staring at the whistle, whispering into the night, "I just need to know why." That was my call, and the forest had answered. The visions collapsed. I was back in the chamber, gasping for air. The whistler stood over me. "You see now," it said. "You are one of us." I forced myself to stand, clutching the silver whistle. "No, I'm not yours." It smiled, or maybe the shadows twisted that way. "Then prove it." I raised the whistle to my lips one last time and blew. The sound that erupted was unlike anything human. It tore through the chamber, shattering the spirals, cracking the stone walls. The forest screamed. The whistler staggered, its body fracturing into shards of light and smoke. "You can't silence memory," it hissed. "Maybe not," I said, "but I can make it remember me differently." I threw the last flare into the heart of the spiral. It ignited instantly, a burst of white fire spreading across the chamber. The whistler convulsed, its form splitting apart into 1,000 faces, each screaming before fading into ash. The walls began to collapse. I ran, dodging falling rock, lungs burning with smoke. When I burst out of the ground, dawn had just begun to break. The ridge was on fire, trees glowing from within as if the forest itself was purging something ancient from its veins. I stumbled down the slope until I reached the river and fell to my knees in the water, letting it wash the ash from my skin. The whistling was gone. For the first time in months, the forest was silent. I stayed until the fires burned out. By then, the ridge was nothing but blackened soil and steaming earth. Headquarters sent investigators again, fire specialists, ecologists, government suits. They called it a natural methane ignition. They said the collapse was geological. No one asked why the spiral-shaped burn marks covered every inch of the ground. They closed Echo Ridge for good after that. I was reassigned to Yellowstone. Different trees, different trails, but every so often, when the wind moves just right through the canyons, I swear I hear it again. 3 notes, low and rising. I keep Jennings' whistle in my desk drawer. Haven't blown it since that night. But sometimes it hums on its own, faintly, like something still breathing inside the metal. And I can't help but wonder, did I destroy it? Or did I simply give it another name? Because the forest may be quiet now, but quiet doesn't mean gone. Quiet means it's waiting. It's been 6 months since the fires. 6 months since the forest screamed itself silent. 6 months since I thought I'd finally buried the whistler for good. But you can't bury something that isn't dead. You can't bury memory. I've told myself that 100 times. It's how I survive the nights when I wake up sweating, thinking I still hear Sarah's voice calling through the trees. I moved halfway across the country, switched districts, even turned down promotion offers that would have taken me near the Olympic forests again. I thought I could outrun the sound. But memory travels faster than footsteps. And it found me again. I was stationed at Yellowstone, assigned to wildlife tracking on the northern range. Vast open skies, golden plains, and forests that breathe differently, broad and dry. Nothing like the wet green lungs of Washington. The first month was peaceful. My new team didn't know what had happened at Olympic, and I didn't tell them. To them, I was just another transfer ranger with steady hands and a quiet stare. But in the 3rd month, reports began to come in. Campers heard strange noises at night, low melodic tones drifting across the Lamar Valley. Hunters found spirals carved into the dirt near animal carcasses. One hiker claimed she'd seen someone standing in the trees, whistling softly as if calling to her. The coordinates she gave matched my patrol zone. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, a trick of the wind, a sound carried from some old logging site. But that night, as I sat by the radio filing my report, the frequency crackled and a familiar voice whispered through the static. "Ethan." I froze. The voice came again, softer. "You left me behind. Sarah." For the first time in months, I said her name out loud. "Sarah, if that's you, where are you?" The radio hissed, then cleared. "The forest remembers." It called again, and you answered. Then 3 notes drifted through the speaker, low, rising, and long. I turned the radio off, but the sound didn't stop. It came from outside now, somewhere beyond the station walls. By morning, I'd convinced myself it had been a dream, an echo from memory. But part of me knew better. The next few days, I started seeing signs again. Spirals in the mud after rain, scratches on the doorframe shaped like fingerprints. One morning, I found my silver whistle on the desk, though I hadn't touched it in weeks. I began to wonder if destroying Echo Ridge hadn't killed the whistler, but released it. The forest had been its cage, not its home, and now it was free. When the first hiker vanished, I knew. He was a local guide named Tom Halpern, last seen near the northern entrance of Lamar Canyon. They found his truck still running, headlights pointed toward the trees. Inside, His phone recorded a 30-second video before the battery died. I watched it with the investigation team. At first, it was just darkness and wind. Then, faintly, a whistle. Tom turned the camera toward the trees. A shadow stood just beyond the light, tall, thin, faceless. Then the camera dropped. The last frame showed the dirt beside the road, patterned in a spiral. The others dismissed it as a mountain lion attack. But I saw the truth in that shadow. I'd seen it before. That night, I packed my bag without telling anyone. Rifle, flashlight, flare gun, Jennings's whistle, and Sarah's old map, the one she'd marked with all the disappearances. Every instinct told me not to go. Every sane part of me screamed to stay put. But I couldn't live waiting for the next person to vanish. If the Whistler had followed me here, then this time I had to finish it. No running, no collapsing caves, no pretending it wasn't real. So I went alone. The trail was steep, carved between basalt cliffs where the wind howled like a dying thing. Dusk fell fast, turning the world into shades of gray and rust. I followed the creek until it forked north, then deeper into the timber. The forest changed the farther I went. The air grew heavy, charged, familiar. I reached a clearing just before nightfall. In the center was a circle of stones, the same formation I'd seen 100 times before. I knelt beside it, brushing away dust. Carved into one of the stones was a name, Sarah Monroe. My breath caught. I ran my fingers over the letters, tracing them until they blurred. "Sarah," I whispered, "are you here?" The wind shifted, carrying a faint smell of pine and something faintly sweet, like her shampoo. Then came the whistle. 3 notes, soft, patient. I stood, heart hammering. "I know you can hear me. I'm not running anymore." The forest answered with silence. Then, slowly, the fog began to roll in, creeping along the ground like spilled smoke. Shapes moved within it. The first one stepped into view 10 yards away. It was wearing a ranger's jacket, mine, the one I'd lost back in Olympic. Its face was wrong, stretched too thin, eyes pale and hollow. Behind it came others, men, women, hikers, rangers, all moving with that same slow, deliberate grace. Their mouths opened in unison, and the whistling began. I raised the rifle. "Stay back." They didn't stop. I fired once. The bullet passed clean through, leaving only mist. The shapes flickered, then reformed closer. One reached out a hand that wasn't solid but wasn't air either. Half smoke, half memory. The air filled with whispers. "Ethan, join us. Remember." Then Sarah stepped forward. She looked just as I remembered before the cave, real, breathing, alive. "Ethan," she said softly, "you can't fight it. It's not the forest anymore, it's us." I shook my head. "No, I burned it. I destroyed it." She smiled sadly. "You freed it." The fog coiled tighter around us. Every memory you tried to bury, every soul the forest kept, it all needed somewhere to go. It followed you. I lowered the gun, voice breaking. Then how do I stop it? She stepped closer, her eyes gleaming like moonlight on water. "You can't, but you can contain it, like it contained us." "How?" "Remember me." Her hand touched mine, cold, light, fleeting. "Don't forget who I was. Don't let it rewrite me." And then she was gone, dissolved into mist. I don't remember running. I only remember the sound, the chorus behind me, hundreds of voices whistling in harmony, shaking the air until the trees themselves shivered. When I reached the ridge, I turned one last time and blew the silver whistle. The note that came out was pure and high, cutting through every other sound like light through fog. The shapes faltered, the whistling fractured. I kept blowing until my lungs burned. The air tore open, a vortex of smoke and light rising from the ground, pulling the fog and the figures into itself. I saw faces, Jennings, Sarah, the hikers, all spinning upward in a spiral of silver ash. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. Silence. The clearing was empty again. The stones lay scattered, cracked and blackened. The fog had vanished. I dropped to my knees, gasping for air. The whistle in my hand had split down the middle, glowing faintly from within. When I looked up, dawn was breaking over the valley. The forest looked ordinary again, quiet, almost gentle, but I knew better. They found me 2 days later, half conscious, near the creek. My story didn't make sense to them. They said I'd inhaled smoke, maybe hallucinated. The investigation blamed a wildfire caused by lightning. I let them believe it. They transferred me again, desk duty this time, safer, quieter. But the quiet doesn't help, because every time I close my eyes, I see her, Sarah, standing in that fog, smiling like she forgave me for everything. And sometimes, when the wind moves through the vents at night, it whistles, 3 notes. I recorded this story because I need someone to remember. Not the forest, not the fire, but her. If anyone ever finds the old records from Olympic, they'll see the pattern. Echo Ridge, the spirals, the missing names. They'll think it's myth. That's fine. Just know this. The forest is real. The whistler is real. And forgetting is the only thing that feeds it. Every time a name fades, it grows stronger. Every time a story dies, it wakes. So if you ever walk under the trees and hear 3 low notes carried on the wind, don't answer. Don't look for the voice. Just remember mine instead. My name is Ethan Cole. I was a park ranger at Olympic National Forest. And now, I keep watch so you don't have to. Because people go missing here. And now, I know why.